All right, everyone, good morning. We're ready to get started. I was excited thinking we were going to have more than one person in class today, but as it is, we still only have one. But a couple others said they may be coming, so we'll see. Otherwise, yeah. So otherwise, what's going to happen, Matt, is Rob's going to stare at you for the next hour and 45 minutes.
Russ. Yeah, all your questions answered, all of them.
So that's awesome. All right, well, so here's where we're going to start. So we, for Matt that's here, we already had him sign in. For you guys that are online, I need you to go in and put your first name and last name in the chat box. And then also, I need your license number as well. So put your license number in there. Now, as I mentioned before, for those that did it on whatever day, Thursday, I only really need your license number in the chat box once. So if you've put it in once, great. I don't need it again. But if you have not, put it in there at least one of the times for these 6 classes. What are you looking like that for?
No, I have my glasses
on.
Oh,
okay.
I'm trying to read what people are writing.
Oh, okay. So yeah, put your first name and last name so we know you've got it. Then, so Rob Oakey is to mute people. Sorry. All right, so Rob Oakey is going to be teaching the class, so I'll introduce Rob in just a minute here. But throughout the class, what's going to happen is he will ask you to put some stuff in the chat box. And again, the only way, typically the division would not let us do this via Zoom. You'd have to be live in the room. But for now till the end of June, we can do it over Zoom. But we have to ask you occasionally to put something in the chat box. Then I'll go through and print out the chat box. And if somebody did not put a comment in when Rob said, then I can't give you credit for having attended the class. So I just want to make sure everybody's really clear. So in the chat box, put in I understand so that we don't have any questions. All right. So, again, go ahead, man.
So do you remember your last training, I had to leave for an appointment, but I have to retake that. And you said it's like I have to make six classes, right? New agent training. Are we keeping track of that, or do I need to keep track of that?
Yeah, so no, I keep track of it. So I've got a spreadsheet. So what happens is it's the 12-hour new agent course. So that you have to have attended basically the 12 hours worth of content that the division has said. I've broken them up into 6 classes. And like where you had to leave, yeah, I can't give you credit for having attended that one. But the next time it comes around, we'll have it. And I just have it in a spreadsheet that I keep track of. So yeah, once you've attended all 6 of them, then I can give you the 12-hour credit. So, all right, next then. So let me introduce Rob. So when you hear the story about the birth of Everest, and you hear the story about George, John, and Rob, and Gretchen, and who, I never remember who the 5th person.
No.
I don't know. Anyway, if Rob thinks of it.
Our IT guy.
Dwight.
No.
Anyway, I guess it doesn't matter.
Jared Blank.
But Jared Blank. So there were 5 people sitting around a table at the birth of Everest. Rob was one of the 5 people sitting at that table when George said we should start a real estate company. So Rob is one of the owners and the founders of the company. And so we're excited to have him get to teach today. So Rob is also a director on the Salt Lake Board of Realtors, right? And serves over there. And he's also in charge of our compliance from within the company, or is that what we call it now? What do we? We've had so many different names. Basically, when you have a problem on a transaction, Rob's one of the guys. So anyway, so I'm excited to have him here. Rob's going to be talking to you about the real estate purchase contract. So as part of the 12-hour new agent, there's 2 pieces of it. We have to spend 4 hours on the REPC. So Rob's going to spend 2 hours on it with you. And then I don't remember what day I'm doing REPC workshop. I think it's next week. But I will spend 2 hours with you on it. So one is kind of a workshop kind of a thing. And then Rob's going to go through and talk about just here's kind of the things that he sees as being common problems and what you need to look out for and understand about the REPC. So I don't know. Anything else I should say about Rob? What else do you want me to tell him about it? He's a Red Sox fan.
That's going to be part of my first question.
Is it? Oh, all right. Okay. Well, so come up here. I'm going to get the REPC pulled up for you guys to be able to see it on the screen. And then just if you have questions, throw it in the chat box, and we'll go from there.
I have to ask him. Yeah, have to ask him if it's better. Show the screen and then ask if it's better.
Okay, yeah. You guys that are on Zoom, do you want lights on?
They won't
or off. Actually, it doesn't matter because
Oh, that's right.
this is a screenshot.
What do you prefer?
I like it off, actually.
Oh, okay. All right, that's fine. Okay.
So, Rob, do you want me to allow them to be able to unmute themselves and ask questions?
That's fine. We don't.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have very many people there.
No.
So, yeah.
So, okay, if you guys have a question as Rob's going, just unmute yourself. You can throw it in the chat box, but I don't think he'll notice.
I won't
it.
pay attention. So yeah, go ahead and ask the question, but then just put yourself back on mute when you're done. So, all right, guys. Thanks, Russ. And we this is a class that we teach at String. That I teach at Stringham, and it is a 4-hour class, which you're going to try to condense in 2 hours time. But one thing I do promise you is you are going to actually get a bunch of nuggets that even agents that have been in the business for a while, I guarantee they have no idea some of the stuff that we're going to talk about because they've never read about it, they never learned about it. And so it'll be something that'll be very useful for you. So welcome. Russ will get you signed in. So first off, this first paragraph, we're going to talk about, it's going to probably take about 20 minutes just talking about this first part because this is one of the most important pieces of the REPC, and it's because the division looks at how we can, what we need to do in order to protect the public's money. And so understanding this first paragraph, it's critical. This first paragraph is talking about earnest money specifically. But there's a couple of key things about this to help you understand timelines dealing with earnest money. So when this first section where it talks, it's broken up in 2 parts. It's talking about when we receive earnest money, and then once we have received it, when we have to have it turned into the brokerage. So the first question that I have about this particular contract, this contract changed a little bit versus what our previous contracts had, and what the change occurred 4 or 5 years ago. I'm trying to remember now. So
18?
something like it was 3 or 4 years ago, our contract changed, and the old contract, it broken out in 2 parts. You were able to take the earnest money upon receipt of writing the offer, or you could hold it and you could check the box and the earnest money would be received or delivered after acceptance of the contract, okay? Our contract doesn't do that anymore. It got rid of the option that it was being received, and it just says immediately after acceptance. So it implies that the earnest money is being received after after the contract has been, it's already accepted. So when that change occurred, there was a piece of language that was also in the old contract. And it said that once you receive the earnest money, that the buyer would deliver to the buyer's brokerage. Well, when they removed that sentence, they also removed the sentence that said that it'll be delivered to the buyer's brokerage. So people still imply, or agents still believe that it's supposed to be deposited into the buyer's trust account, the buyer's broker's trust account, which normally is what happens, and that's great. But one thing that you may not have been aware of is it no longer specifies which brokerage the earnest money should be deposited in. I believe that was a mistake. They just haven't gone back and have to make a change. So if we look at the language, earnest money to deposit in the amount of X dollars in the form of a personal check, a money order, whatever, after acceptance of the REPC, REPC by buyer and seller, and receipt of the earnest money by the brokerage shall have 4 calendar days in which to deposit the earnest money into the brokerage real estate trust account. It doesn't say into the buyer's brokerage, doesn't say the seller's brokerage. It just says it says brokerage trust account. So technically, if the earnest money is deposited in the seller's trust account or in the buyer's trust account, you're in compliance. You're good. Now, could you be more, if you're writing an addendum, could you be more thorough by identifying which brokerage that money is going to be held in? Yes. If you were to say earnest money be held in the buyer's brokerage trust account, now you've specified where that earnest money truly has to go. But my first question I have is, what if you decide to put it into a title company? What do you have to do? Does the contract say title company as an option?
No.
So if we don't change anything, if it got put into a title company's trust account, would you be following the contract?
I would say no.
Okay, we've got one no. I'm not sure how many people are shaking their head online, but got one no. Okay, I like that answer. Okay, that's a good answer. So the answer to the question is no, you would not be following the contract because it says brokerage real estate trust account. A title company is not a brokerage real estate trust account. So if it got put into a title company's trust account without an addendum to change the terms, then your client would be in default of the contract because it was not agreed upon.
The other thing that was confusing in real estate schools, at least in the book, it was 3 days. And then
Okay.
now, I don't know if it got changed to 4 count, but I'm thinking in the old days, someone would cut a check to their realtor, and then the realtor would have to take the check and deposit the broker's account.
So you're bringing up a good point, and this is often very confusing with the test process because you're right. In real estate school, the question, it'll say, how many days does it take, does the agent have to get earnest money deposited? And it does say 3 business days or whatever the contract says.
Okay.
So because the contract says 4 calendar days, doesn't say 4 business days, it says 4 calendar days, but Utah statute says 3 business days or whatever the contract says or something along those lines of the language. So they're both right, but that is oftentimes people will get confused if they go take the test. They're like, well, no, look, it's 4 calendar days. Well, no, statute is 3 business days or whatever the contract says. And so that's where the change occurs. So let's go back to the title company piece. So first off, can you deposit earnest money into the title company's trust account? No. The answer is yes. If you use the addendum that changes the term of the contract. So there is and you must use this. So first off, we as agents, we are required to use any contracts that are provided for us by the division. Oftentimes agents believe that they have the ability to draft their own contracts. That unless you're an attorney, none of us have the ability to do that. Okay, so we must use the contracts that are provided by the state. Now, some things we have this incredible kind of blank slate that we get an addendum that is blank, right? And so, okay, well, if I use addendum, then I can say whatever I want to say. And so now we start drafting our own contracts within this state approved form. And I go to that part of saying, yes, asterisk, but we got to be careful. Again, we have to also use whenever possible, use the state clauses or language that is being provided. So for example, there's a clause or an addendum subject to the buyer selling a home or buyer buying a home. Sorry, subject to the buyer selling their home. That is an addendum or a clause that is already drafted for us on the MLS, and we can incorporate that into addendum, and now we don't have to draft anything, we just fill in the blanks. So there is also a title company addendum that says buyer and seller agree to deposit earnest money into a title company's trust account. So if you were to do that, you would have to use that addendum that buyer and seller would both agree to allow happen, and you're fine. You're now changing the terms of the contract. There's one more piece about that addendum that is critical. So not all brokerages allow earnest money to be deposited into their trust account. Our brokerage is one that allows that. Some other brokerages out there in the marketplace, they don't have a trust account for that to happen. So they often use the title company as where they deposit earnest money. Now we're going to go into the contract that is going to explain a couple of things that can be an advantage or a disadvantage of where that earnest money is going to be held. We'll tackle that in a little bit. But our brokerage holds earnest money because the contract makes it more of a benefit to us, and we believe our clients when we do that. So as a preference, if you're an agent in our company and you're working with a buyer, we would prefer that you hold earnest money with the brokerage, unless it's a cash deal, you're going to close quickly. It may not be the best scenario for that. There's certain circumstances that may not be the best, but whenever possible, hold the earnest money with our company. If it's a buyer, if you represent the seller and the buyer, their brokerage does not have a trust account and they're asking to have it held at a title company, if it were my listing, if I were the listing agent, I would counter that and say that the earnest money be held at the seller's brokerage trust account. And we'll explain a little later as to why that's an advantage. But that's what, if one of you guys were representing the buyer and wrote an offer on one of my listings, you presented the addendum to have it at the title company, I would counter it that earnest money would be held at our trust account. Okay? So we've identified that the brokerage is spelled differently, but this next piece is what I want really to understand. So first off, again, I said at the beginning that the timeline is broken up in two parts. It says at the beginning, the property described below and agrees to deliver no later than 4 calendar days after acceptance. So this is talking about deliver earnest money no later than 4 calendar days after acceptance, right? So this first part, if you can't see what I'm looking at on the screen, the first 2 lines are talking about solely when the earnest money must be delivered. The last part, where it says after the acceptance of the REPC by buyer and seller, the earnest money, the brokerage shall have 4 calendar days in which to deposit earnest money. So again, this first paragraph is talking about 2 timelines. 4 calendar days after we receive it, and then the last part is 4 calendar days to deposit it. That's important to understand the understanding. So let's paint some scenarios. Let's say that I'm the buyer's agent. I am representing my buyer. We're going to write up an offer today, okay? And my buyer gives me the earnest money right when we're writing up the offer. So I've received it. And we have, if you didn't know, there is a confirmation and receipt of earnest money that if my client gives me earnest money, I want to sign that form and give them a copy that now they have proof that they've delivered earnest money to me. And that form would ultimately get deposited in the loop. So we've got a record of when that earnest money was received. So I'm writing the offer today. My client has given me the earnest money today as well. So I have it in possession. We submit the offer, and let's say that the offer gets accepted 2 days from now. So Thursday, the offer gets accepted. Okay. So let's take the first timeline. First timeline says property described below and agrees to deliver no later than 4 calendar days after acceptance. So first, have we accomplished the first timeline? We got one nod, and I have no idea if anyone else is nodding. Have we accomplished the first timeline? The answer is yes. So when did we accomplish the first timeline?
If you got it deposited before the 4 calendar days. Is that right?
No?
Once it was accepted.
Okay, so the question was, when did we accomplish the delivery / receipt of the earnest money? And the answer is right when it got accepted. Because remember, when I wrote up the offer 2 days earlier, so I wrote the offer today, I already received the earnest money. It says that I have until 4 calendar days after acceptance. Well, acceptance occurs on Thursday. I've already received the earnest money. So that first timeline is already accomplished because I received it already. So that means that the first part of that paragraph is now done and immediately goes to the second part. The second timeline says 4 calendar days after, after acceptance of the REPC by buyer and seller and receipt of the earnest money, the brokerage shall have 4 calendar days to deposit it. So because we've got acceptance and I'd already received the earnest money, that automatically kicks me into the second timeline and the clock starts ticking. So let's go back to the example. The example was today's Tuesday. I received the earnest money. I wrote the offer. Thursday, we got accepted. So because the first part's already been done, the time that I have to deposit it would be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Monday by 5 p.m. is the latest I have to get it deposited into the broker's trust account. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Does that make sense what I just said right there? If not, please chime in. So now let me give a little bit of a different example. So my first example is I wrote the offer today and I received the earnest money. Now we're going to tweak it a little bit. I'm writing the offer today, but I didn't get the earnest money. We'll still keep Thursday as when we get accepted. So if we get accepted on Thursday, according to the contract, when must I at least receive the earnest money? What's the latest time that I have to receive the earnest money in that example?
Monday.
Why?
Because it can't be more than 4 calendar days. So Monday would be your absolute latest.
Okay, so that's spot on. What's your name?
Aaron.
Aaron. Okay, nice to meet you. That's correct. So the answer was we got accepted on Thursday, and it said, remember, it says that they agree to deliver no later than 4 calendar days after acceptance. So Thursday we get accepted. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday is the latest that I have to receive it. Okay? Then the next timeline kicks in. After acceptance and receipt, now the next timeline occurs. So if that were the case, so we went under contract on Thursday. Monday is when I received the earnest money. Now the absolute latest that I have to deposit the earnest money would be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So technically, the longest time that it could take for us to deposit the earnest money is 8 calendar days. If everyone maximized their timelines. If it took 4 days to receive the earnest money after acceptance, then it also took me 4 days to get it deposited. It could be 8 calendar days to get that to happen. Okay? So now let me just do one last little example to say how this could be different. Going back to our example, I write the offer today. Today's Tuesday. We go under contract on Thursday. And I received the earnest money. My client brings me the earnest money on Saturday. Okay? So I get accepted on Thursday. Friday, Saturday. So now 2 calendar days after acceptance is when I received it, which then now I have how many calendar days after that?
2. Well, after the 2, that would be 4, right?
After the 2, I have how many calendar days to get it deposited?
4.
Okay, I have 4. So in that case, a maximum number of how many days in that situation could it take to complete the contract?
If it was accepted on Thursday, you didn't get the money until Saturday, so you got Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, you have till Tuesday, right? Is that right?
So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. No, I'd have until Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay.
So remember, it's always after, not the day of. So if I'm accepted on Thursday and I receive on Saturday, Friday, Saturday. So I received it 2 calendar days afterwards. And then after acceptance and receipt, now the next clock is ticking. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Oh, so you were, I did bad math. Sorry. Sunday, Monday. Yeah, I can't Saturday again. Sorry, I'm confusing you guys. I receive earnest money on Saturday. So the next clock starts ticking Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Wednesday would be the latest that I have to deposit that earnest money. Doesn't mean that I have to wait till the end. We're just talking about the worst case scenario, the longest time frame. So in this last example is because I received the earnest money 2 days after acceptance, in that case, the maximum time it could take is 6 days, 6 calendar days instead of 8 calendar days. So my whole point of this paragraph is the time that it takes to get the earnest money deposited depends on when you received it. If you received it when it was the offer was accepted, well, we've got a maximum of 4 calendar days to get it deposited. If you receive it 1 day after it's accepted, you have a maximum of 5 calendar days. If you received it 4 calendar days after, you have a maximum of 8. So it depends on when you receive the earnest money. The last thing I will say is this. Now, just because we have 4 calendar days to get it deposited, just remember that it also takes us time to do when you turn it into the office to get it deposited. Now since COVID came out, we've actually incorporated a new online way to be able to do it. So you can send your client can actually do it online without having to physically come into the office or physically drop off a check. So we do have that piece in place as well, which is fantastic. It's another option. But if you're still collecting a check, just know that if you're waiting until 4:50 on the 4th calendar day to get it deposited, you're not giving us a lot of time, and there's a good chance that we can't get that deposited for you. So if you receive it on day 1, now, if it's a Saturday, you receive it. We're not open on Saturday. We're not open on Sunday. And if Monday is a holiday, which next coming week is, well, Tuesday early in the morning, first thing in the morning, get it dropped off to us. Okay? So making sure that you meet those deadlines. But normally, you know, if it wasn't a holiday on Monday, you get it turned down Monday. That way, for whatever reason, if there was an issue, it's not going to be a problem. But normally, it's not an issue. So the key part about this, I just want you guys to truly understand this piece right here. Many agents, I'm talking experienced agents that have been in the business, are unaware what the time frame that they have. I mean, this was now 3 years ago. I was at every year there's a Utah convention, and sometimes they rotate. 1 year it's typically in Utah, and the next year it's out of Utah. Well, this particular time was in San Diego, and this question came up. You know, how much time? What's the maximum amount of time? And I'm like, 8 calendar days. And I've got brokers that are telling me, "No, you're wrong. You're wrong." And even the attorney that was facilitating that class, he's like, "Yeah." He thought that I was wrong as well. He wasn't familiar with it. He's a smart attorney. He just didn't have the language in front of him to remember kind of what the time was. But here it was in this class. There were 150 people in this class, and they're saying, "Oh yeah, Rob's wrong," and all this other stuff. Went up afterwards, and went to the attorney, and I just said, "Look, If I'm wrong, please clarify with me, but here's the language. He's like, nope, I made a mistake on that. We've got to clarify that in the next class. They had a legal panel that was in this next class, and they like, okay, previous class, the information was given wrong. It's correct. This is what it's supposed to be. So I'm saying a lot of agents that you can have an experienced agent facing you, and they're going to tell you you're wrong. I'm here to tell you you're not wrong. This is exactly what it is. And read the language. It's very clear on how the language is done. Just people have not taken the time to actually understand what this paragraph is. But I want
Rob,
you guys.
Can I ask a question?
Who has a question?
I do, Chris Stout.
Oh, Chris, please.
Hey, question on when they bring it into the brokerage and if someone like Courtney fills out the earnest money receipt, you address that. Is that different? What's the timing on that since they're bringing it right into the brokerage?
That's a great question. So you are an agent of the brokerage, right? Okay, so I'll just say yes. You are an agent of the brokerage. And so whether you receive the earnest money or the brokerage receives the earnest money is the same thing. So when they come in and drop the earnest money off, and when they turn it in, we have a process already in place that whoever accepts that check, they will fill out the confirmation receipt of earnest money and give that to the client and when it's being turned in. So that is the same timeline. Whether you receive it or the brokerage receive it, the number's still the same.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great question. Does this make sense? I want you to understand this because I mean it. I literally take 20 minutes, 25 minutes for this paragraph because it is that important. The division takes very seriously how we as agents protect the public's money. And this is the public's money. If we don't understand it, we can lose the public's money. I'll bring up one last thing. So let's just use my first example that I received earnest money once I wrote the offer and it got accepted on Thursday. So I've already accomplished the first option. So remember, once we got accepted, I have 4 calendar days to get it turned into the brokerage. So again, it was accepted on Thursday. I have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Let's say that I went out of town. It's a holiday. It's going to be a holiday weekend this coming week, right? So I left out of town. I leave out of town Thursday night, and Thursday night is when the offer got accepted. I'm not in the office Friday, Saturday. Obviously, it's closed. Sunday. I come home to my house on Sunday, but the office is still closed on Monday. So I get it deposited on Tuesday, which is 5 calendar days. First off, have I followed the contract? The answer is no, I have not followed the contract. So what's happened?
You're in compliance, I guess, right?
I'm out of compliance. So Section 16 of the contract, which we're going to talk about in a little while, it talks about default. My client, and remember, it's not Rob Oakey that is written on this. It's my client's name. So my client is now in default of the contract. So just be aware of that when we talk about default and what the consequences of default are. Because I didn't do my job, I now put my client in default of the contract. And the seller now has the right to do a couple of things.
They can cancel it, right? They can just say,
They could cancel.
Have you had that happen before?
Yes, absolutely have. And I want you to be thinking about this. In one situation, the earnest money was $100,000. So think about it. Okay, good little timer. So
That's not an easy amount to actually for a bank or for us to deposit either. It might take a couple days.
no, so everybody, you got to sign in. Oh, you already did. Okay.
Yeah.
So those of you who are online right now, I need you to write something in the notes that we're talking about $100,000 earnest money. And I want you to put $100,000 earnest money because I'm a Red Sox fan. Okay? Make sure, if you're watching, we're talking $100,000 earnest money because I'm a Red Sox fan. Okay? If you don't have that on there, if you don't, everyone type that in, you won't get credit for this class. Okay? So the next little timer. Okay, so back to our example is, because I go on a vacation, I go have a great trip, great time, awesome, great trip. Well now, because I didn't get that earnest money turned in, the seller technically could say, that's $100,000 and I can go sell it to somebody else, I can go do whatever I want.
Well, I didn't think about that either.
I'm going to cancel. You know what? I just made $100,000 extra. Because if I go, I mean, I'll resell it to you, but it's the same offer, or I'm going to go sell it to somebody else. Or let's just say the seller got a better offer. This happens all the time. Forget the fact that it's $100,000. Let's just say it's even $1,000 earnest money. But now the seller received a better offer. That's $10,000 more money. And they're looking for a way to get out of the contract. Buyer was in default. Show me when you got the earnest money deposited. Deposited late. Seller's choosing to cancel because of buyer default. Cancel the contract. Now they go accept another offer. Remember, the reason why they're hiring us is because we are the professionals. And unfortunately, in our industry, well, this part's great. In our industry, we have the ability to make a lot of money. And it doesn't require a lot of education to make that amount of money. Unfortunately, because we have the ability to make a lot of money, in my opinion, not very many people understand what they're doing to make a lot of money. Just use this example. If you were to have surgery done, do you want the guy that barely passed their college entrance exam, they were the bottom of their class in academics and physical capacity. They do shoddy work. Do you want that person to, because insurance is going to make the same payment. Do you want that person to operate on you, or do you want the top of the class to operate on you?
Top of the class.
So do we want to be the bottom of the barrel doctor, or do you want to be the top of the class?
Top of the class.
So that's something that only you guys can decide. I would hope you want to be the top of the class as well. So give that perspective. You can be both. I mean, can you imagine the malpractice insurance that the bottom guy has to have because he has shoddy work? Probably gets sued a lot.
So what happened with $100,000?
In that example, fortunately, both parties had issues. They were both in default, so they ended up, it saved the bacon, but one of them was ready to, so they didn't have, there were conflicting problems on both sides, and they decided to work it out and still do the deal. But it was a big deal. Okay. That is
Rob?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
So if we don't deposit the earnest money in time, the sellers can keep the earnest money and resell and put the house back on the market and sell to someone else.
Okay, let me just...
Is that correct?
Yes, let me just do this. I'm just going to go to section 16. We're going to talk about default right now because it'll explain what it is. And then that way, once we get to it, we're done. Okay, so section 16 of the contract talks about if buyer's in default or seller's in default. Depending on who it is, they both have the same remedies to fix the problem. So, but they're just a little bit in reverse order. So in the example that we've been talking about is buyer would be in default if they didn't get the earnest money deposit. So if buyer defaults, seller may elect one of the following remedies, not all three, but one of the following. The first option is cancel the REPC and retain the earnest money, and it's talking about the seller, that the seller may cancel the REPC and retain the earnest money deposit or deposits, if applicable, as liquidated damages. So it was $1,000, great. Seller's providing a notice of cancellation, and that earnest money is being given to the seller. Option B, maintain the earnest money deposit, if applicable, in the trust account, so the earnest money would remain with our company, and then sue the buyer to specifically perform on the contract. So meaning the buyer was, let's just say the buyer didn't want to buy the property anymore, and the seller wanted to sue to force the performance of the contract. The seller could do that. Or 3, option C, the earnest money would be returned to the buyer, and then the buyer, or to the buyer, and then the seller would pursue any other remedies available in law. So meaning when that, let me give you kind of an idea what these basically are. Option B, it doesn't happen as often, but it happens more often when the seller's in default. And let me give you the example of what I'm talking about. So the seller just decides, you know what, I just don't want to sell the property anymore. And the buyer's like, I want that home.
I had that happen to me. But
You personally?
Yeah. When I first moved here, we put an offer in. The buyer didn't want to sell. The daughter didn't want to move.
The seller didn't want to
The
sell.
seller. But I only had $1,000 earnest money. So I got that back.
Right. So that's what we're talking about, is the applicable side of things. What's easiest? Is it easiest just to get the $1,000? Yes. But let's talk about option B. If the seller was in default, let's talk something a little more unique. If you've got a bunch of cookie cutter homes, you're in a project and you're under contract, you were go to court, there's 10 homes available. If this seller didn't want to sell for any more of a reason, it's possible that the court could say, you know what? Seller changed their mind. There's 4 other options, 10 other options available. You can still get the home. You know what? We're not going to enforce the sale of this seller because you can still accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. I don't know. I'm just saying this is something that a judge may do, but it's up to the judge if you're to go that route. But now let's think of this, think of the movie Iron Man. His house that's perched up on Malibu, this concrete structure that is perched out on the ocean. It's kind of a unique property, isn't it? It's not a cookie cutter subdivision that's right there. That's a one-of-a-kind unique property. In my opinion, if the seller decided they didn't want to sell that home, the buyer would have a bigger argument to say, no, I want that home, and I'm taking you to court, and I want the court to uphold the contract. And if the buyer wins, the seller could also be responsible for the attorney's fees that it costs to go to court. But it's a risk. It's a risk. So depending on the risk reward, depends on if someone's going to do it. Option 3 is if it's only $1,000 earnest money, but you as a buyer, let's just say you moved down here. You've spent $7,500 in moving expenses, and now you're having to stay in a hotel or whatever to make this happen. You've incurred $7,500 worth of damages, so you could go to court, still small claims court, be a little cheaper, say, hey, you know what, $1,000 isn't enough. That's why I'm suing you for something different. You owe me $7,500. And if the court agreed with you, in that case, the buyer would owe $7,500 if that's where the damages were. So option 1, definitely the easiest and the most commonly used as a solution because it's simple. It's easy. The only difference between buyer and seller, so if seller was in default and the buyer chose option A, what that would mean is if it was $1,000 that was turned in, the buyer would get their $1,000 back and the seller would then be required to pay the buyer $1,000. So let's just read, other than that, B and C are the exact same. If seller defaults, buyer may elect one of the following. Cancel the REPC in addition to the return of the earnest money deposit, if applicable, buyer may elect to accept from seller as liquidated damages a sum equal to the earnest money deposit. So people think that they get confused. Oh, they get double the earnest money back. Well, no. They get their earnest money back. The buyer gets their earnest money that they put. And then the seller would have to match that earnest money.
Yeah, because I wish I would have put $3,000 down there.
Right. Well, this is a valid point. Yeah. When we represent buyer and seller, yes, on the buyer side, well, I don't want to put very much earnest money because if I cancel, then it's not that much of a risk. Okay, well, what if the seller's in default? Now you didn't have, and vice versa. If you represented the seller, you may want to might want to get a lot of earnest money because if the buyer defaults, then you got damages. Okay, well, in that case, what if the seller's then in default? You would then owe that amount of money too. So it's kind of finding a good balance. If you're representing, if the buyer or the clients want the deal to come together, hey, what's it going to take to make the deal come together? Ultimately, how you have to answer the question. But you got to be thinking, yes, it's not always just one side. I want to protect my buyer, so I have the lowest amount of earnest money possible. Okay. Well, now the seller's in default. Now you didn't really protect yourself, did you? So look at it from both sides. Does that make sense? Okay, let's go back up to, good, we covered some important stuff already. Okay, section 1 deals with specifically included items on the property. So this stuff, one of the great additions in this contract deals with included items that in the past weren't brought up, but now are becoming very, very common and much of a necessity. When we're talking about included items, what's the main word that you learned in real estate school that starts with an F?
Fiduciary responsibility.
Okay, that's a great one. Dealing with personal property.
Oh, fixtures.
Fixtures. That's the word that we all learned, right? Now that because we're in real estate, I learned this fixture, and what determines if it's a fixture?
It's attached to real property?
If it's attached, right? It's attached, it's a fixture. Seems pretty simple. I mean, this is attached. It should be a fixture, right? Okay. You know, the light socket, those are attached. Should be a fixture. You know, is this a fixture? Should be a fixture. It's attached to the wall. Okay. Now, what about your $100,000 piece of artwork? It's hanging on the wall.
Not attached.
So just the nail is attached, right?
Well, like, you know, your cabinets are hanging up on the wall too, but they're considered a fixture. Right?
Okay. Okay. Fair argument. Fair argument. But here's where that argument was pretty solid for many years. And I'll tell you where it all went out the window. Your flat screen TV that is now hanging above your fireplace. Is the TV attached?
Yes.
I don't know. To me, how is that any different than the $100,000 piece of artwork? The bracket's attached. The TV is just mounted to the bracket.
That's why the bracket has to stay, right? Like when you're leaving.
Well, our old contract didn't specify any of this. Our new contract is given a little bit of answers. Here's this projector up here. Is that attached?
Yes.
We used to have the downstairs speakers that were outside mounted right here. Are those attached? Or is the bracket attached? No matter what whatever you're thinking, the problem is you're now thinking, I don't know, is it? Is it not? Remember, when you took the test, fixture is attached. That is a part of the contract. Period. That's what we all knew, right? And then now you're the one that's selling your house. You're the real estate agent. you're selling your house and your TV, you took the TV off the wall. Whoa, that was attached. No, that's personal property. So your own logic got all messed up. And my answer to it is, unfortunately, it's not that clear, because you may have one opinion and I have a different one. And unless we're going to go spend $2,000 to save a $1,000 TV to go to court to determine who's right or wrong, we might want to specify in the contract what that is. Now, fortunately, the contract has specified a couple of things. So if we're looking at, it talks about in the bottom of the paragraph of 1.1, it says all installed TV mounting brackets, all wall and ceiling mounting speakers are included. So the TV mounting bracket, it's now been identified. The bracket is part of the fixture, but the TV is not. So the argument would be here is this satellite, this projector, the bracket's attached, but the projector isn't. Now, it doesn't say projector in here. It just says TV mounting brackets. Well, that's a projector mounting bracket. That's different. I still think it's the same, but is it possible that you might think differently? So my answer to it is clarify. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, are you planning on taking the projector with you? Well, yes. Okay, well, let's make sure that we exclude that just to be clear from the contract. What about the bracket? Now, it typically would be included. Now, let's just say the bracket that has the TV, it's an expensive bracket that is made for that particular TV only. Can I take that bracket with me if I'm the seller? You're shaking your head, yes. How do I do that?
Bill sell. You got to do that, right?
Okay. So the answer is I just have to exclude it from the contract, because right now it's part of the contract. So if I say the TV mounting bracket above the front room fireplace is excluded from the transaction, now I've changed the verbiage of the contract. Perfectly fine. Buyer and seller accept that. Great. They take the whole thing. Otherwise, if they don't say anything, they can only take the TV.
Okay. Do you put that in section 1.2, or do you actually have to do it?
I would probably do it. You could do that here, but I'd probably just put it on an addendum. Just makes sense. Okay. Here's two other things that are becoming big deal. I want you to be aware of this because this is a problem. So I'm going to just describe it because we got people that can't see on the board anyway. So there's this new technology that exists, came out 2 or 3 years ago, maybe a little longer. It is a round little piece. And you walk by, it turns on, it has like a number that'll say 70 on it. Sometimes it changes to 71, might go to 69, 72, whatever it is. The number little thing changes. It even has a little thing that can rotate. And when you rotate it, the number goes up, goes down, kind of this new thing that exists. Anybody have an idea what I'm talking about?
Thermostat.
A thermostat? What? No, thermostats are those little white boxes. You hit a little button up and down and they do no value in it. It's just ugly little thing. That's a thermostat. I don't know what you're talking about. Because let's read the first part about this. It says, after the first line, unless excluded the following items presently owned or placed or the property, plumbing, heating, air conditioning, fixtures, and equipment. Whoa. So when I write I put my home on the market. I was pretty bright. I marketed that little round dial thing that just said how cool my house is because it has this new technology. And it says, we got this Nest thermostat. Ta-da! Nest thermostat here, which, hey, I've always wanted a Nest. I'm buying that house. It has a Nest thermostat. It's mine. Great. We go under contract. We're getting close to closing, and I'm like, I paid $250 for that thing, even though I got a $100 rebate. I paid $250 for that. I'm taking that with me, but I can't take the furnace with me, can't take the AC. I'm gonna put back that piece of crap white thermostat that always worked before too, back, and I'm gonna take the Nest with me and take it to my next property. Is that okay? I provided a thermostat. Can I do that?
If you specified.
The seller would have had written that in the addendum, right? Or
Okay, that's the answers I want. We can do all that stuff as long as buyer and seller agree to it. Now, this is before the offer is being submitted. Or sorry, after the offer. Well, if I want to take that with me, before I put it on the market, great, replace it out. Or at least before I receive an offer, I have to do it. Once I've received an offer, the home needs to be in the condition it was as it was presented. Okay? The other big things are, these are the keyless entry. I mean, I kid you not. I've had sellers, they take the security system, they take the cameras, they take the keyless entry locks, and they put the old door stuff back on it. I mean, the seller screws up on that. And the last part about it, solar panels. That is a big deal. Because now think about it. If I'm a seller and I do not exclude those solar panels, or at least indicate that I am not paying off the difference, it says that everything here is going to be transferred to the new buyer free and clear. So you have solar panels on your house, and there's $20,000 that is still owed on those solar panels. If you're the seller, what do you plan on doing with that? Now, fortunately, we have an addendum that answers those questions. So back to what I said at the beginning, use the solar panel addendum that specifies what buyer and seller will do. Is the seller going to pay it off? Is the you say lease, but is the remaining amount going to be paid for by the buyer? Does the buyer, if the buyer doesn't want to spend that amount of money doing it, the seller's not going to pay it off. Is the solar panel company going to come and take those solar panels now? And if so, seller's got to repair a roof.
Plus, not to get into it, but the credit, you know, like you talk to people that have solar panels, they're like, yeah, I've got such and such credit with the electrical company. I don't, you know, is the buyer going to get that credit or whatever once they?
Well, you mean define what you're talking about credit.
Well,
you're talking about,
you know, once
if it's a $30,000 system, that you got a tax credit that covered about 10 grand, a third of the cost.
Well, I meant like the energy credit.
Oh,
you know, so like you know.
Yeah, that'll remain with that. I mean,
yeah. Okay.
Hey, these are beautiful things depending on the scenario. When I bought my house 2 years ago, and sure enough, it had solar panels on it. The seller still owed $15,000 on it. Paid it off.
Seller paid it off?
Seller paid it off when I bought the house.
Okay.
It's a beautiful thing. I 4,200 square foot home. My monthly bill is $8.98. Fully finished, everything. I love it. Now, if I had to pay $30,000, if it wasn't paid, would I be as excited about it? No, because am I going to reap the benefits of it? I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to stay there. I think I'm going to stay there a while, but is it possible I stay there now only 2 more years, 5 more years, 10 more? I don't know. And I spent $30,000 on a system that I didn't read. So if you're environmentalist, I'm not going down that road. All I'm trying to say is, depending on where you are, it worked out perfect for me, but my seller who bought it a year earlier spent, even though he got a $10,000, it was a $28,000 system. And I'm guessing he probably got about $10,000 tax credit. Okay. So he still paid $20,000 that he used for a year. And he made payments on it. Was that a great investment for him? No. But I love him to death. thank you so much. It's a beautiful, I love every month.
Even in the wintertime too, it's $8, right?
Well, what happens is it stores energy and it banks it. So obviously in the wintertime, I'm not gaining as much as long as I've stored enough energy to get me through the winter months, because every March it recycles through. And so far, I think I've paid once like $20, something like that. But like I said, I love it what I've got, you know, but I wouldn't want to go. So it's a big deal. We got to.
Hey, Rob.
Yes.
Chris, I had a deal that had solar panels, and one thing that I found out, I mean, it's a great thing that you get to figure out all these things when you have a deal under contract with solar. But one of the things that I found out is not all solar companies are the same, and you need to make sure for your buyer, the buyer connects with them to make sure that warranty is transferable to the new owner. So there's lots of different things. Also, like the roof was all needing to be repaired or replaced in the next few years. Some of the companies will allow it to be taken off once and then put back on. Others make you pay for that. So just a couple of things it's just a key to ask lots of questions if there's solar in the picture.
Absolutely. Great advice. Thank you. Okay. So believe it, we've gone through an hour already of this class, and we're going to have to go through quickly a lot of other stuff. So we may not touch much, but I'm going to focus on the things that are really kind of important at this point. So let's go through real quick. Here we go, 1 more. No. So water rights, real quick. Normally I ask you questions to try to confuse you a little bit, but I'm going to save time. This is talking about if you're transferring water rights. Bottom line is this: if there are water rights that are part of the sale and you as the buyer, you want them, you don't need to do anything. Just leave it blank, because they're automatically included. The following water rights, if applicable, are specifically excluded from the sale. So meaning, if you put water rights there, you've automatically excluded it from the purchase. So if you represent a seller, which we had a seller in this situation, they had 4 water rights. They were valued at $2,500 a piece. The seller told the agent they did not want to sell those water rights, and the agent was aware of it. But when they received the offer, this was left blank, and the agent didn't catch it. And so they were under contract, and immediately, as they were moving forward, they didn't realize it until it got to closing, and the water rights were being transferred, and the seller's like, what's going on? Bottom line, it was like a $12,000 commission, of which $10,000 went back to the seller because the agent screwed up. Because the seller did not want to include them. So if you represent the buyer and you want the water rights, you're probably going to leave this blank. But if you represent the seller and this is blank, you better make sure that you exclude those water rights if necessary. Okay? Section 2. Real quick, the first line, that's the total purchase price number. So you're offering $300,000 for the purchase. In that the first where it says 2.1, since you guys can't see my finger when I'm pointing at, the property's at $300,000. In line A, whatever the earnest money is, in this example, let's say it's $1,000. You're going to put the $1,000 in that spot, okay? Then let's say that it's, just keeping numbers simple, let's say we're getting a 90-10 loan. So if it's a 90-10, that means that you're going to get a loan for $270,000. You're going to bring in $30,000, right? $300,000 purchase, 10% is $30,000. So you're going to get a loan for $270,000. So in line C, that number would be $270,000. Okay? In line, now you're not doing seller financing, blank. You're not doing additional earnest money, blank. Option E, balance of purchase price. That number is what?
So the balance of purchase price, the purchase price is $300,000, the cash settlement. It's putting 10% down, so $30,000. And then would you have the earnest money in there too, or not?
And that's what I'm asking the question.
Well, it depends what the earnest money you put down is.
So we have $1,000 here, have $1,000 earnest money, 270 is the new loan amount. What number do I put in E?
29,000.
The answer is $29,000. Because the $1,000 is part of your down payment. Okay, we're at our next time. Okay, so now we're going to say, I am a Red Sox fan that works at C21. Okay, for those of you that are online, you've got to write this down. Put it in the, type it in the box. I am a Red Sox fan that works at C21. Okay, last time, because we're going to move on. I'm a Red Sox fan that works at C21. Make sure you all type that in order to get credit for the class. Okay.
Hey, Rob, can I ask a question right here with regards to if you are not certain, we want our contracts to be really clean and not leave any holes. In one of my last transactions, it was a USDA. This buyers were selling a house that they had, and they were uncertain of how much they were going to put down. Okay. In those types of situations, what is the best thing to do when you don't know how much they're going to put down, and it really is going to be determined?
Okay. It's a great question.
What's best to do?
Okay, great question, and I'm going to answer that by reading one other section here. But give me 2 seconds before I answer that question. Let me just still finish what we were talking about.
Perfect.
So again, it was $300,000 purchase, $1,000 earnest money, 270 is the new loan. The balance of the purchase price will be $29,000. So the 1,000, the 270, and the 29, that number, the purchase price should equal 300. So that number there should be the same number that is on the top line of 2.1. Make sure that you go back and add it up. Just do the math, making sure that your numbers add up. Check the math. Doesn't matter how simple it is, we often make mistakes. Now, in answer to your question, it answers that right here. It says, in the second line of 2.1, it says towards the tail end, any amount shown in sections 2.1C and 2.1E may be adjusted, may be adjusted as deemed necessary by buyer and the lender. So whatever number you put there, it doesn't mean that it's set in stone. You have the ability to adjust that as you go. But what I would just say is, hey, what do you think the buyer is intending to do? If they're intending to put 20% down, put 20% down because it makes it look good. If the buyer intends to, like, no, I don't have any money down, and now you're trying to misrepresent your client, and you put 20% down when you know that's not what they're looking to do, then yeah, that's a problem. But if your buyer, let me get some water. If your buyer is hoping to put 20% down, and they think that's going to happen, go ahead and do it. Turns out it doesn't work. They only do 10% down. That's fine. Just we've got to go into any contract that we presented a true picture of what we knew at the time. We can't misrepresent. Okay?
Thank you.
You bet.
Perfect. Thank you.
2.2. This is the other addition to this contract that was fantastic. It deals with if they have a property that needs to be sold. Okay? It is very clear. And we have agents that are misrepresenting this. We had one in just 2 weeks ago where an agent made an offer on a property knowing that they had a property to sell, but they didn't want to disclose that to the seller because they knew that it would make their offer weaker. And I'm here to tell you that would be a violation. That could be an ethics violation and a administrative rules, a violation against your licensure. And it could also argue that it would not validate the contract, because one of the elements to validate a contract is you must have a meeting of the minds, and you cannot misrepresent or commit fraud. If they knowingly knew that they did that, you could also argue they committed fraud. So this says buyer's ability to purchase the property to obtain the loan referenced in 2.1 above, and or any portion of the cash referenced in this above is or is not conditioned upon the sale of a real estate owned by the buyer. So meaning, if you are selling a house and any of the proceeds of that house are going to go towards purchasing another one, then that means it's subject to a home selling. And if so, you must use the subject to the sale property disclosure or addendum. Period. It isn't, well, my client didn't want to disclose that. I get it. No buyer wants to disclose that because it makes their offer weaker. But otherwise, if you don't do that, you could argue that you committed fraud. You could argue that you didn't have a meeting in the minds. You didn't create a clear picture. Now, if they want to sell the house, but they don't have to, meaning I can afford purchasing this house without the need of selling another, okay, great. Well, if that's the case, then you don't have to make that happen. But you better be able to provide, the evidence to support that that's the case. But if the proceeds from that are going to be part of it, so that's the moral question here is, hey, I don't have to sell it, but I want to sell it because I don't want two mortgages. I'm like, okay, I'm going to ask you the same question. Are any of the proceeds of the sale of that house going to go towards purchasing the next? Whether you can afford it or not. Well, yes, if I sell you, then we've got to disclose. Otherwise, if you're not, then we don't have to. Make sense? It's pretty, that one's pretty black and white for me. So just make sure that we don't fall in that trap. Okay? Settlement, section 3, we're going to go real quick here. Understanding the definition of settlement versus closing. Hopefully you guys know that. Settlement is when we actually go sign paperwork, and that deposit, the down payment, the 10%, that's the money that has to be brought to the table. So the 29th, we've already got the $1,000 earnest money. If I'm settling, I'm going and signing documents, and I bring the $29,000 to the title company. That's settlement. Closing is when it's funded and recorded. So now the lender has paid the $270. They've given their money, and now the documents have been recorded with the title company. That's when closing or recording happens. That's the difference between the two. Closing, it also says that it must occur within 4 calendar days after settlement. So if I sign on Friday, well, then it must fund and record by Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. By Tuesday, according to the contract. Okay? Possession. Just specify what dates you guys are wanting to occupy the property. I'm a firm believer in using the hours after recording, because it just
that's negotiable between the buyer.
It's always negotiable between buyer and seller. But just if you represent the buyer and the home is occupied, of course the buyer wants the home right up upon recording, but the seller still needs to get out. So just think of it logically, okay? Give the seller 24, 48 hours to get out of the home. If the home's vacant, well, then check upon recording, and it's not a big deal. It won't be a problem, but just be mindful of that. Special assessment. We know what a special assessment is, right?
We are kind of a weird, I know we're on time, but in real estate school, there was a builder, and the buyer bought the house, and it was vacant and all that stuff, but like insurance-wise, they couldn't let somebody move into that house.
Could be.
But the agent let them move in, right?
And that's not their call.
Yeah, so he was saying that they almost lost the house, basically. Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, what I would say is it's according to the contract. So if the contract said it was upon recording and the seller found out afterwards, well, the seller screwed up because they accepted an offer, then they would be technically in a default. But if it said the property, they can occupy the property 48 hours after, and it records, and I'm the agent, I give the keys, and go ahead and get in that. Well, that was on me. But if the contract says something, that's different. Now the seller's trying to prevent the person from getting the home and changing the contract. I'm like, hey, the buyer's entitled to get in. It's their house. So what are you going to do, seller, to fix the problem? That's a different scenario. Now I'm just following the contract. So I don't know all the details, what it was, but we must follow the contract. Okay. Special assessment. You're part of an HOA, and let's say that the HOA just the parking very dark. There's no outside lights that are around the area. Just cars are getting broken into because it's just dark. So there's 100 units in this HOA. You each own one of them, so you have 1/100th of a vote in this HOA. And your car just happens to be in the worst spot, and every single time your car is getting broken all the time. So you're all for getting lights on it. Yet somebody else, their spot is right under the only light that's there. They never have a problem with it. I don't want to pay for any lighting, it's fine. Well, if the HOA ultimately votes, whatever the CC&R say, let's just say it's 51% of the votes, agree to install lighting, now it's a $200,000 cost to get these lights installed. That means every unit would have a $2,000 special assessment. And because the HOA voted for it, it's part of it. So if the special assessment occurs and it's been voted upon, then who's going to pay for that? Buyer, seller, or are they going to split it? This is where it's also important that making sure that you read the minutes from the HOA, and the seller provides those to make sure, hey, what has been brought forth? Okay. Are there any rental deposits that has to be provided? If you're purchasing a property and you might be an investor, you want to find out if there's any short-term or any rents that are there or any leases that are in place. You want to get copies of those. Where does that money, if there's any deposit that's being held, who's keeping that? Where's it transferring to it? Okay. That one's pretty much all there. Section 5 is often misunderstood because it talks about who's representing who, which company, which agent's representing whom. Well, before we write an offer, if I represent a buyer, before I write an offer, there's one document that has to be signed before I write an offer. What is it? There's actually two part of it, but just stick to the one.
Agency disclosure?
Agency disclosure. A buyer broker, it's state law that requires that before any written offer is done, agency must be established. So a buyer broker must be written before you write an offer. Well, some agents have gotten confused and they think, well, I disclosed agency. I talked about agency in Section 5. So even though I didn't get the buyer broker signed, I solved the problem because I addressed it in Section 5 of the contract. And that is wrong. Read the first line. Buyer and seller acknowledge prior written receipt of agency disclosure provided by their respective agent that has disclosed agency relationship confirmed below. This is a confirmation of agency that has been disclosed. It is not identifying agency. This is confirming that it's happened. And so all the agents that are writing offers and then they get a buyer broker signed afterwards, they're breaking state law every time. Okay? We're gonna just read the title insurance and rental policy, stuff like that. Seller's disclosures. Oftentimes, buyer and seller may choose not to provide seller's disclosures. This ends up being okay as long as they agree to it in writing. But if not, this must be provided. So if you represent a seller, it's not just filling out the seller's disclosures, that 7-page document, handing that over and you're done. It's not it. If the home's built before 1978, you got to provide the lead-based paint disclosure. Fortunately, now the MLS requires it when you fill stuff out, so that solved that problem pretty heavily. But you got to provide a commitment for title insurance, PR. You got to provide the CC&Rs if they're there. The most recent minutes, budget, financial statement, and an HOA. So if you take a listing that's part of an HOA, you've got to get some information, and you want to get that as soon as possible, because if you go under contract quick and you say that the buyer tells you you've got 3 days to provide seller's disclosures and you haven't gotten this information yet, now your seller could be in default because they didn't meet their deadline.
Could you go over the C, a commitment for title insurance as a reference?
So what is it? Or
well, there has. I guess I need to tell them that. So it's title insurance for the buyer and the seller during the closing, right?
So the paragraph above, title insurance, it says seller agrees to provide buyer with an Alta owner's title policy. So the seller is going to be providing a title policy to the buyer. It's a owner's policy that the seller will be providing. So they've got to provide a copy to the seller what that title policy is. So when you take a listing, all you do is you call up a title company that you use. Hey, I need to order the PR for this. Great, they'll get it done. And they'll provide all the paperwork, what it'll have. And initially it'll say, right now, there's these things that are encumbering the property. Once it closes, these are going to be removed, and now it'll only be this. So it gives the buyer the opportunity to say, hey, there's a lien on this property of $50,000 to John Smith. Who's John Smith? Oh, I forgot, I got to pay that guy. Well, now you got to get that guy paid off because he's liened your property. That's what this is doing. It gives the buyer the opportunity to see what's tying up the property. If it's got a bunch of issues, buyer may want to look at it and say, there's no way they're going to be able to perform on this transaction. I'm canceling the deal. Okay. So, but the key part I want you to understand here is the seller is agreeing to provide all of this. If they don't, by the deadline, the seller is in default. And we already talked about default, what that would mean. Okay. And you can't, some of this stuff takes time. One thing I want to go, the most recent minutes. We talked about the HOA approving a special assessment. Let's say they approved the special assessment in the month of May. They did the voting in May. Great, it's approved. But they're going to say, you know what, we're going to hold off for 6 months before we start the process, and we'll start collecting on month 7 the money. Okay? Now in June, there is no discussion about the special assessment because it's already been voted on and done. And in June, I decide July 1st, I put the property on the market and I get an immediate offer, meet a buyer, and I go to sell the home. And I'm the seller. I have to provide my most recent minutes. And the most recent minutes in that case were the month of June. And there's no discussion about a special assessment. So did I, as a seller, did I provide all of the information to the buyer, and the buyer doesn't realize that there's a special assessment that's been brought onto the home? The answer is yes, I did everything I was supposed to do. So my point being is I might want to just ask, hey, are there any special assessments that are scheduled to occur? Because it may not provide it with the information that's here. We want to think outside the box. If we call the HOA, hey, I just want to find out, is there any special assessment that has been approved or talked about by the HOA? No, they haven't talked about any special. Okay, great, get that in writing. Are there any, what are the transfer fees? What are the costs to transfer the ownership? Are there any, what's the financial status of the HOA? Is it financially in good shape? Just ask some questions about this, okay? Section 8, important part. It's your due diligence. 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3 are basically the same. 8.1 is talking about your due diligence. 8.2 is talking about your appraisal. 8.3 is talking about your financing. All of them are your right, your ability to cancel the contract or to move forward. 8.1 basically just says you have the right to do whatever inspection you want. If not, I mean, by the deadline, if you cancel, you can cancel, get your earnest money. 8.2 says the same thing. If it is subject to the appraisal, by the deadline, if the home doesn't appraise, you can cancel the contract, get your earnest money back. And then 8.3 is subject to financing. If by the deadline, you can cancel, get your earnest money back. But let's talk more about 8.3. All those others are just, you have the right to do it, okay? 8.3, if it is subject to financing, one thing I want to point out, because agents blow this every single day. If you represent the seller, I'm here to tell you in 8.3 BI, there's a blank section, and I'm here to tell you if you represent the seller, whatever you've agreed to with the earnest money, my recommendation is put half the earnest money in that field. So if it's a $2,000 earnest money, my recommendation would be putting $1,000 in this field if you represent the seller. Because this whole piece, 8.3 was changed because what people were doing, what agents specifically were doing, is they were using the financing deadline as basically a secondary due diligence. And because it's based on the buyer's sole discretion, it's pretty difficult to prove something. So what I mean by that is, if the buyer, they pass their due diligence deadline, and in 8.
Rob, can you scroll up? Can you scroll up on the screen
Yes.
for the Zoom so we can see?
To what?
Sorry.
To what part? Just
Section 8. Is that what you're talking about? Section 8?
I'm talking specifically about 8.3 is where we are. Did you want to go up to 8.2 or 8.1? And if so, to talk about what?
Oh, no, sorry. I just don't see 8.3, section 8.3 on my screen.
You don't? Is it not right there?
Mine's still at 6.2, but maybe my phone's stuck.
Maybe it's because I did scroll up. It should say.
Okay.
Let me see.
Okay, maybe that's just frozen then.
Okay. Is anyone else on the call that they can tell, they can chime in? Is it 8.3?
I can
Yes,
see
it's
it.
8.3.
Yeah, it's showing 8.3.
Okay. All right. Good. So it might just be, just yours might have been frozen. Okay. So 8.3 is what we're looking at. And what was I talking about?
What's that box? You said you recommend that half of that.
What I was saying is people were using this section changed when our contract changed a couple of years ago, because agents were using the financing deadline as a secondary due diligence. What was happening is they're claiming that they couldn't qualify, and because it doesn't say that you have to the lender has to say you do not qualify. On financing, if you don't agree to the terms, let's just say that the loan, the interest rate didn't, just 2 seconds.
Yeah.
If the interest rate didn't drop enough, I was hoping it was going to go to 2.5%. It only went to 2.6. Therefore, I don't feel comfortable with the loan, so I'm going to cancel. Well, that is a fair argument with it. But in reality, what was happening is an agent was coming back and saying, well, we really want to negotiate with the seller to have them fix these 3 items. And if they don't, well, then I'll cancel based on financing. Well, that's really a due diligence reason why they're canceling, and they're trying to have a fallback on financing. So the forms committee, they said, look, to minimize that, let's put some skin in the game for the buyer. And what this section now says is, if the buyer cancels after the due diligence deadline, but before the financing deadline, whatever number is in this section, that amount of earnest money will at least go to the seller. So they can still cancel based on financing, but since they've passed due diligence and they decided to move forward, the buyer now has more skin in it. So 2 days after the due diligence deadline, the buyer decides to cancel based on financing. in that example, if there was $1,000 here, that means $1,000 would go to the seller and $1,000 would go to the buyer. Now I get the fact if you represent the buyer, you want to put 0 here or leave it blank, and that's basically making it, you've got two, I mean, you're in essence giving another reason to cancel for at a later date that doesn't cost your buyer anything. But if you represent the seller, is that what you should be doing? And my answer is no. Think about it this, if you're in a multiple offer situation, I guarantee the majority of the buyers are going to be submitting offers that have this blank. And your client wants the home, you present an offer that says, hey, look, this is how bad my client wants the home. We're willing to risk money after we get past our due diligence. I bet the rest of your offers don't include this. And it's possible that the agent that is representing the seller has never understood this either. And they're like, yeah, that's a much better offer. Look what I did for my seller. Seller, I'm looking out for you. These other offers, they didn't have anything protecting you. But I made sure this one offer, they did it. We want to go with that offer.
So Rob, you just counter that offer as the seller's agent. You just come back and counter with the 8.3i and an amount in there.
Yes. So if I understand your question correctly, if an offer came to me and it was blank or had 0, and I represent the seller, then yes, I would counter that saying 8.3 BI to be 1,000. And if buyer and seller,
right, thank you.
And it goes. Now your question, did I answer your question?
You answered it actually, but you know, you hear, and I haven't sold a home yet, but you hear financing fell through, or they didn't get a loan or something all the time, right?
Absolutely. So hence the reason why you want to make sure that your seller has things happen. I mean, the last 2 months, we're talking about, we had a deal that was going to the closing table that day, and then they lost their job. That was real. Well, I mean, in that case, it was all the earnest money because they already passed their financing deadline that went to the seller. But that's a real piece of it. I just want you guys to understand that's the part that's really different here. One thing that's also different, it talks about 8.2, which is the appraisal. Is it if the home does not appraise, is it fair that the seller should get $1,000 if the home does not appraise? Not if it's subject to the appraisal, it's not. So that's the only part that's different here. And you must cancel based on the appraisal. So if you're going to cancel after due diligence deadline, but you're canceling based on the appraisal, you better make sure that you check the cancellation box, or they're saying that it's in reference to the REPC, you're canceling based on the appraisal. And the way to tell the difference is this. In section 8.2a, buyer's right to cancel. If after completion of the appraisal by a licensed appraiser, buyer receives written notice from the lender or the appraiser that the property is appraised for less of the property's price, the notice of the appraised value, buyer may cancel by providing written notice to the seller with a copy of the notice of appraised value, no later than the financing appraisal deadline. So if because the cancellation box, it just says you check a box. You're canceling after due diligence, but before finance and appraisal deadline, you just check the box. If you only send that cancellation over without this, then you're canceling off of financing and not the appraisal. And by doing that, you just cost your client $1,000. Okay? Because if it doesn't appraise and buyer and seller can't come together, you cancel based on appraisal, and you have $1,000 there and you represent the buyer, great. The buyer's going to get their full $2,000 back. But if you don't provide that notice of appraised value with the cancellation, it's going to cost them $1,000. I guarantee agents don't know that. So don't be the one that screws it up. Okay? Let's go through here. Read section 10. It's not just talking about home warranty. It's also talking about the condition of the property. Bottom line is this: the home is being sold in as-is condition. People often say, "Well, it's an as-is." Well, it is an as-is home. The seller is disclosing that you're buying the home in as-is condition, but you as the buyer can still ask the seller to make repairs. And if the seller agrees to it, okay, great. Well, that's where you're coming to negotiation. The other part about it is the seller is obligated to disclose what they have as knowledge about the home. If it's a material fact, the seller is obligated to disclose that. They cannot hide that. Seller acknowledges and agrees that the reference in the physical condition of the property. Seller agrees to disclose in writing to the buyers defects in the property known by the seller the material affected. Okay, it's identified there that they have to disclose that. Okay, and if they tell you something that is a material fact, but they don't want you to disclose it, you are obligated to disclose it as well. So it's like, I'm sorry, so that is not a protection under confidentiality, which is one of the fiduciaries. That isn't a protected right if it breaks the law. Right? Let's go. Section 12. Just real quick, because we don't get it very often here, but once in a while we do. If you represent a seller, we had this, we've got this issue going on right now. All right, there's the last one. Okay, right on, chatting, put in your note that the Sox are going to win the pennant if we ever have another baseball season. We're going to make a Red Sox theme here. Red Sox will win the pennant. The next season. Red Sox will win the pennant the next season. And then when we end, do one more at the end of class. Okay. So we got a transaction right now that is still, we represent a buyer. It is a $9.3 million deal. Okay. Earnest money is $200,000 with an additional $800,000 earnest money as part of the contract. So $1 million potential earnest money that exists. I'm not going to get into too many of the details. Long story short, buyer and seller are just, as of right now, they're not moving forward. Seller wants not only the $200,000 earnest money, but they feel like they're entitled to the other $800,000 additional earnest money. So the seller feels like they're entitled to $1 million of the earnest money, and buyer does not believe that we have a valid contract. And one thing that I know that hasn't happened is the seller had some short-term rentals that they had in place, and they never provided, which is part of the seller's disclosures, they never provided the short-term rentals.
Who are we representing?
We represent the buyer.
The seller now wants that $1 million.
Seller believes that they're entitled to it. Buyer doesn't. And one thing that happened is, like I said, they never provided short-term rental agreement. Not a judge. This is certainly their call. I mean, all this other stuff, but so potentially $1 million earnest money. But one of the things that have to happen is if there are short-term rentals with a lot of the COVID that was going on, they can't have new leases that are signed. They must honor any existing. So here's another issue. You buy a house in St. George or something that deals with more rentals. We'll just say Park City, it's closer. Well, if it was my house and I'm selling this property and it was a second home for me, so I also rented it out. Let's just say, Christmas, Thanksgiving, my second house that I have in Park City, I don't need to be up there over Christmas. I can stay right here. I rent that out for the last 3-5 years, and it's currently rented right now. I forget to disclose that. Now you are buying the house and you go to move in, or you move in November 1st, and over Thanksgiving weekend, someone's showing up like, hey, I'm supposed to be here. You're like, this is my house. You're not supposed to be here. I got a lease. I got a contract that says I'm renting this property over Thanksgiving. You're the new homeowner. What do you do?
Call my agent.
Your agent's not going to like that phone call because you better have your bags packed and you're getting out of the house for that week because this is going to, you bought a home that has existing lease agreements in place that are upheld and those survive closing. So hopefully you have some relative that you can go live with for the next week. And you hope that there's no more short-term rental contracts for the home that you just bought. So make sure that we're aware of those if we're dealing with any of that stuff. Okay? Talk about default 42. Let's go notices. Okay. Section 18. We're going to bounce back from section 8 to 18. Okay, so first off, let's go back to section 8, where it says buyer's right to cancel. 8.1b. Buyer's right to cancel or resolve objections. If buyer determines in buyer's sole discretion, because of those words, sole discretion, that's why it makes it pretty difficult for a seller to say, no, you can't cancel based on that. Really? It's my choice and no one else's. Pretty vague. In buyer's sole discretion, that the results of the due diligence are unacceptable. Buyer may either, no later than the due diligence deadline, cancel the REPC by providing written notice to the seller whereupon the earnest money shall be released and to the buyer without any further requirement authorized by the seller, or no later resolve the issues. But the part I want to first understand, it says they can cancel the REPC by providing written notice. Okay? So tell me what written notice is.
Go ahead.
I have no idea.
I would say you'd have to write to the seller, and it could go through the agent, but I no longer want to buy this property, and it has to be written.
Okay, I mean, there's a cancellation form we already talked about, right?
Yeah.
Buyer's notice cancellation, you check the box, you fill that out, send it out to the seller. Would that sound like that would be written notice?
Yeah, if it was before the required deadline.
I mean, that's definitely an option. Okay, write a hand note. Can I send a text? Buyer has decided to cancel the property. Is that in writing?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is it in writing?
Yeah.
Does it say written notice to the seller or the seller's agent? So you text the listing agent. Now you've got proof to show, hey, here's my written notice that we canceled. Can I send an email?
Yeah.
Hey, the buyer's.
It's signed. Well, that is written notice, right? You're right.
How's the email going to be signed?
Well, you would like DocuSign, right?
Okay, so now you're saying I'm sending an email, but so DocuSign I can't DocuSign an email. I'd have to print the email out and DocuSign that to send it over. So you're doing a different step. This says written notice, so now you're asking to do something else. Do I have to do that?
Oh, yeah. No, you just have to do written notice. It doesn't have to be signed, does it?
Okay. Okay, it says buyer must provide written notice to the other party they're canceling. So the answer to the question is, does an email work? It's written notice. Yes. Does a text work? It's written notice. It is written notice there. Yes. But this wouldn't make sense if I were just setting up this way. There has to be something else that I'm intentionally trying to confuse you from to bring this to your attention. So yes, everything I talked about is written notice. However, if you send a text, an email, and that's all you do, you have not followed the contract. Because there's another section that we're going to talk about, which is 18, which agents don't understand. They never read that part because it says written notice here. Well, let me talk about what section 18 says. Section 18 talks specifically about notices. And it defines what a notice is. Except as provided in section 23, which is talking about acceptance. All notices required under the REPC must be A, in writing, which an email and text is. B, signed by the buyer or seller giving the notice, which an email or a text is not. And then and received by the buyer or seller or their respective agent or the firm no later than the applicable date. So if the due diligence deadline is today at 5, it's today, we'll talk about timelines in a second, then that must be received by the other party by today. So if I can prove, and that's the reason why when we ask you guys to send things, we recommend you send everything through .loop, because .loop, it gives a record of when that information was sent. And it's, so when you send things from .loop, especially if we can prove they've received things in the past, we can show that, yes, we sent it at this time. So even though they may not have opened it, we got a record of it. Otherwise, if you guys send it through your email, then I don't know if you sent it through email. I've got to have you print off now a transaction history of your own email to show that you sent that cancellation through your own email system. So it's more work for you, but we're going to ask that as an office that you provide that, so we can now say that, hey, we've met our obligation. So if you type up a cancellation, send it through .loop. I mean, that's what we use. Send it through .loop, and now the record is already there. So make sure that's the difference between the notices. A text or an email is not going to work. I intentionally set it up to screw you up because, yes, section 8, you guys fulfilled that, but you didn't fulfill section 18. Okay? Okay, risk of loss, real quick. It's now not too long ago. You may not remember Harem. Do you guys remember in Bountiful 5 years ago, the mudslide, the 2 or 3 houses and the tennis club that got wiped off the mountain? I guess if you just moved here, then you know what I'm talking about? Okay. Well, California, they got a bunch of fires and stuff like that. So anyway, this is talking about.
Well, I want to hear what happened in Bountiful that relates to this.
Okay, so I'll just use that example then. So what this says is dealing with insurance coverage, what's there, plus risk of loss. Well, there was a mudslide in Bountiful 5-6 years ago, and a big chunk of the mountain slid down, and it took out 3 $500 to maybe $1 million houses. And then there's the Bountiful Tennis Club up there. It took out the majority of the tennis club as well. And there was, I think there was a home that was under contract at the time. Well, the contract specifically just says, look, if prior to closing any part of the property is damaged or destroyed by fire, vandalism, flood, earthquake, or act of God, the risk of such loss or damage shall be borne by the seller, provided, however, that if the cost of repairing such loss or damage would exceed 10%, then either party can cancel. So meaning, obviously in that situation, if I was the seller of that house, would I want to make sure that transaction, buyer, you have to buy this house. We're under contract. You said you're going to buy this house. Of course, the buyer's not going to want to loan. First, the lender's not going to loan upon it, whatever. Buyer doesn't want to buy that house. So because it's also in the contract, that's really kind of the get out of jail free. But let's just say that we had a little bit of the earthquake that we just had 2 months ago. Or I guess depending where you live, periodically been going. Some damage, other places cause more cosmetic damage than others. We actually dealt with that. A couple of homes that had some issues. Well, depending on what it was, if it was a foundation issue, is it possible it's greater than 10%? Buyer wants to cancel, probably have the right. But if it was a couple of doors or, maybe 2-3% of damage of the house, but it still was $10,000, $15,000, the seller would be obligated to fix it and before they can move on. The seller wouldn't have a choice. They'd have to fix it and move on. Now, proving what was already existing versus damaged, another issue that you can't go through. Time is of the essence. So unless otherwise stated, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time is the default timeline. You can change that, but if you don't, if you just put a deadline is, let's say 19th, is May 19th. That's all you say? Okay, May 19th at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time is the deadline. 5:01, the deadline is passed. Okay, but I can say 5:19 at 10 p.m. is the deadline, and I'm changing contract. And in that case, 10:01, the deadline is passed. Okay, last two things. Section 23. Acceptance. I want to make sure you guys understanding when acceptance occurs and what it is. Acceptance occurs when only the following two things have happened. Seller or buyer have signed the offer or counteroffer where it's indicated, and seller or buyer or their agent has communicated to the other party or that it has been signed. So it has to be signed and communicated. So let me give you a real example that happened with my client. We represented the buyer. I had to send over an offer, counter back and forth. The agent sends to me written confirmation, hey, the seller has accepted the offer, but I'm not able to send it to you. I'll send it to you tomorrow. Great, no problem. And he said he was going to send it in the morning. Well, afternoon comes, 12, 1 o'clock, and I've reached out, hey, I haven't heard, when are you going to send me the offer? Like 2 o'clock, he finally tells me, oh, sorry, the seller received another offer, and they're now looking for multiple offers. That's not correct. I've got a written text from you that said that the offer was accepted. That means one of two things happened. You're either now lying that it wasn't accepted at the time. So you, agent, you misrepresented what actually happened. They never signed it and you told me that they did, which is a mistake on your part. Or B, they did sign it and communicate it, and now they're trying to claim that they didn't. Either way they're misrepresenting, potentially committing fraud. Long story short, my client wanted to take this agent down, file a complaint, and they almost did. We handled it outside. My client decided to walk away, but the agent screwed up. The agent should have said, hey, verbally, we've accepted your offer, but my client's not able to sign it till later tonight. As soon as we get it, then we'll plan on selling it. That's a different answer. We're not under contract then. So you the same thing. Don't tell anyone you're accepted unless those two things have happened. If your client says, yeah, I accepted, great, so you've already signed it? Well, no, I'll sign it when I get home tonight. Okay, I just need to make sure I understand. Acceptance occurs when it's been signed and communicated. Okay? Deadlines. Last part of dealing with deadlines. There is no written requirement, like this is the answer, that's the answer. I can just tell you what is typically kind of used. I'd say seller disclosure deadlines are anywhere from 3 to 5 days after acceptance. If you're wondering what dates to put here, 3 to 5 days. Due diligence, 2 weeks is pretty common. Finance and appraisal, 21 to 24 days. And settlement, 30 to 35. Those are kind of normal. If you've got extenuating circumstances that would require you to increase some of those numbers, then just have an answer to provide it. But that's kind of a common response. And then last thing will be acceptance. This one's more so just understanding the difference. Too many people say, hey, what's the response deadline? And I'm here to tell you, there is no response deadline. A response deadline just said, hey, thanks for sending the offer. That's a response. there's an acceptance timeline, counteroffer timeline, or a rejection timeline. There is not a response time. So just know that whatever deadline you put here, that's the time that the other party has to accept, counter, or reject, not just to respond. So we want to make sure that our clarification, because a response, literally, like if it was a response time, I send the email, hey, thanks for sending me the offer. That's a response. So if I met that deadline, then we should still have the ability to accept or counter or reject the offer. But once that deadline happens, and if there is without any response, the offer has automatically been rejected. So that's what I'm saying. There's either an acceptance, counteroffer, or rejection deadline, not a response deadline. Okay? And unless there's other questions, the last thing to type in, go Sox. Go Sox. Everyone type that in there. Otherwise, if there's other questions, let me know. And I know it's it's kind of sucking in stuff through Firehose, but I really kind of want to go through the information that people really kind of miss. I mean, it takes me 4 hours to go through that contract, and you can see why. Everything we focus the 2 hours are really just kind of the heavy things that gets missed. There's still a bunch more information there, so I would definitely encourage you guys to make sure you read it so you know what you're talking about, so you're not the physician that was at the last of the class. Be the first of the class. Okay? All right, guys.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, guys. You bet.
Hey, Rob,
Yes.
will you just do the, on the Zoom thing, just click the leave and then end meeting?
Sorry, you cut out right on the Zoom. Do the what? Leave the meeting?
They have it ended. Do the
Yeah.
end meeting.
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay.